Welcome back to the DSR channel, and I want to go over something about the Artificer that I think is important, right? The Artificer is a class that's always been near and dear to my heart. I love it. I've been an IT guy, engineer my entire career, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I love the Artificer. I also might like it just because it's never been as good as other classes, and so it hasn't been played as much, and so I like playing it more just because it's not played as much. I don't know. Or maybe I just like fight for the little guy who's like always, you know, not one of the most popular ones, right? Maybe I identify with that and I'm like, yeah, I want to play the Artificer, make him good. Anyway, so the Artificer is an interesting class in that it has a lot of things that are very important to the core of the class that are require you to like dig into a lot of things. Okay, it's kind of like the spellcasting classes in a sense, or the whole spellcasting feature, which is to really make the best use of spellcasting, you have to parse out and read all the spells that are on your spell list, right? Before you decide which ones you're going to put on which ones you're going to prepare. And Artificer's got replicate magic item and spellcasting. And replicate magic item is just like spellcasting in the sense where you need to go through, like, read the whole, list of all the magic items that apply and parse out which ones are going to be good, what scenarios you might want to use them for, and what kind of builds these things would be good for. So I did a video on replicate magic items specifically. That one came out yesterday. And today I want to cover like additional kind of tactics for artificers is what I'm going to call it. And these are things of like all kinds of features, not just, yes, there'll be some replicate magic item stuff in here, but also things that are not just replicate magic item, other aspects of the class, things you want to think about. And this is like advice, food for thought. This is not like how to optimize an artificer. And yes, some of the stuff in here is replicate magic item, and it's more advanced tactics is what I'm going to call it. I left it out of the video on replicate magic items yesterday intentionally because I didn't want that video to get really complex and deep, and it was already a lot to cover anyway, and it was going to be like this really long video. So yeah, I'm going to put it into this video, and I'm still trying to keep it away from this video, away from like really advanced tactics or things that are hard to pull off, or you really need to know how to role play well to pull it off, or you really need to know how to like optimize your character to pull it off. I'm kind of intentionally staying away from that as well. So if you don't see that kind of stuff here, that's okay. That's exactly what I'm going for. I'm trying to make this something that's still accessible for the majority of players, and my ultimate goal is to make the Artificer more accessible for the general player. Okay, because it's such a great and fun class. It just has a lot of stuff here. The way they've designed it, it just has a lot of stuff that you need to figure out and understand to have a good enough character with it. And good enough is always my goal, right? You want good enough mechanics and good enough role play, and then you're going to have a great time, okay? And if sure, you can have more than good enough, but just good enough is the on both is the minimum bar we're going for in order to have a really good time playing any character, okay? All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so here is the features table for the Artificer. And first up, they have a feature that isn't shown on this table anywhere. And it is a super, super important and highly valuable feature, and it's called Homunculus Servant the spell. They get access to it at level 5 when you get access to second level spells, and it is not called out anywhere in the class, but it is so valuable. There should have been a line item right here that said Homunculus Servant, and just I guess in order to justify it like they did with Paladin, just say you get to cast it once for free, right? Paladins at level 5 can cast find Steed once for free, and it's shown right here in their class table right at level 5 to really call that out that this is a major feature for you, and they should have done the same thing with the Artificer. Okay, just to like put a nice big sign on it saying this is a big important feature. Only Artificers can get this spell. So yeah, right there, just put it in your head, Homunculus Servant level 5. And because that Homunculus Servant is really valuable now. It used to be not very good in 2014 because partly because it was a infusion, so it took one of your infusions known and infusions created, but also it needed a bonus action to command it, which kind of just made it blah, right? It conflicted with any other bonus action you're trying to use, especially if you're like a battlesmith who has a pet and you have to use your bonus action to command the pet. It just immediately made the homunculus just useless because the pet is so much more valuable than the homunculus. Well, now it no longer requires any action for you to command it, right? It's completely free, just like Find Steed. So you create it, it lasts indefinitely, so you don't have to resummon it. And you can give it items, okay? It can have hands and arms. You can, and not only can it use these items, it can also attune to magic items, right? The only requirement to attune to magic items in general is that it be a creature, which it is. So it's a tiny creature, which means it can attune to up to 3 items. Now, it doesn't count as any other special requirement like it doesn't qualify as a spellcaster, so it can't attune to anything that requires attunement by a spellcaster. And I did mess that up yesterday or last couple of times in videos when I've talked about Wand of Web and giving the Homunculus Servant a Wand of Web. Well, I can't use that because the Wand of Web requires attunement by a spellcaster. And here is the spell, right? It shares a lot of attributes. It's very similar to the Fine Steed, but its damage, it's got a ranged attack, 30 feet. Its damage is 1d6 plus the spell's level. And another great kind of pro Artificer tip to combine with this is if you get a Dragon Mark and Potent Dragon Mark, right? There we go. Potent Dragon Mark. Okay, Potent Dragon Mark gives you a spell slot that's higher than what you normally have as a half caster, right? So at level 5, you'd have a 3rd level spell slot. And at level 7, you'd have a 4th level spell slot. And at level 9, you'd have a 5th level spell slot, which normally you don't get access to until much later, right? Levels 9, 13, and 17. Okay, so you can use this spell slot to upcast your Homunculus Servant and make it more powerful. And then on a short rest, it just comes back, right? And the Homunculus Servant lasts indefinitely. So you can upcast it. That means its damage is going to be 1d6 plus 3 force damage. It's going to have a few more hit points, so 20 instead of 15, which is nice because you're going to need those 20 hit points. It has evasion, so it's got a lot of ways that it can just survive a little better than the Steed, although the Steed from Fine Steed has more hit points. So this good thing that this one has evasion. It also gets this boost on its ability checks and saving throws equal to the spell slot level you used to cast it. So another reason why you want to use the highest spell slot level you possibly can when you summon this thing. But that damage just, I mean, it's unless you're like a battlesmith or an artillerist or something like that, this damage is probably enough to like double your DPR at level 5. Okay. For a battlesmith and artillerist, that's not going to double it, but you should still use this because it's still going to add damage. It might be like 25% increase or a 30% increase. Probably not 50%, or sorry, not 100%. Might only be a 50% increase for an artillerist or battlesmith. But yeah, that's still not nothing, so you should definitely use it. Now, another good thing you can do with this Homunculus Servant is it can't attune to Wand of Web because it's not a spellcaster, but it can use a Wand of Magic Missiles. It can use the Pipes of Haunting because those don't even require attunement. Wand of Magic Missiles is going to do like what on average, like 11 damage, 3d4 plus 3, 7.5, 10.5. So a Wand of Magic Missiles is going to do 10.5 DPR because it automatically hits. So 10.5 DPR. So if you're anything but a battlesmith or an artillerist, that's going to triple your damage output. Nice. Okay. And using its action, not yours. So you're still free to do whatever you were going to do, whether it's an attack or a heal or a buff, right? So very good. And even for those other classes like the battlesmith and the artillerist, right? Their damage, this might double their damage by using Wand of Magic Missiles. Okay. So great. Pipes of Haunting doesn't even require attunement, and that causes the frightened condition, no friendly fire. So it can be using its action to use that as a control effect. Fantastic. It can also attune to Weapon of Warning, right? So you put the Weapon of Warning on the Homunculus Servant, it attunes to it, so you don't use one of your attunement slots, and then it can't use the weapon. I mean, it could try to, but it's not proficient with anything. So it has the weapon, but who cares? Because what the main thing you want from that is not the weapon itself, but the effect that it gives you and the whole party advantage on your initiative checks. Fantastic, right? I mean, you can keep that Weapon of Warning on yourself until you start filling up on attunement slots, then just put it on the Homunculus Servant. Great. Another great thing to try or to use is the Dust of Sneezing and Choking. Whether you make it as a magic item or whether you get it from like a replicated magic item plan that you have. All right, so here's the magic item. When you make it, however you get it, it only has 1 dose, but and it's got a few things here. You utilize action to use it. It is a 30-foot emanation from whoever uses it, and everything in the area makes a DC 15 Constitution saving throw, or they're affected by it. Okay. But constructs, elementals, oozes, plants, and undead automatically succeed. All right. If a creature fails, and those are kind of the list of creatures that don't breathe, I guess, or aren't affected by breathing. Okay. That's going to be important here in a sec. Any creature that's affected by it is incapacitated and is suffocating. Now, suffocating is not actually that big of a deal because you can go for a number of minutes equal to your Constitution modifier. So if you have a Constitution of 14, that's a +2 modifier. That means you can go for 2 minutes without breathing before you suffer any effects, which is way longer than the average human, at least nowadays, I think, right? I mean, I know people can go longer than that, but people who train for it can go longer for that. Not the regular person can just like not breathe for 2 minutes and be fine. Anyway, you're suffocating, and then you get to repeat your save at the end of every turn, and a lesser restoration removes it, specifically listed by the magic item, not by the spell, right? So the incapacitated condition is a great condition to impose on somebody, and it has no duration, okay? Which means it can just last forever until they save or until somebody cures it, okay? Now, you don't really want to use this, right, yourself, because that means you're going to be included, and if you're standing next to your allies, they're going to be included. Okay, but let's go back over to the Homunculus Servant, right? It's a construct, and it flies, okay? So you give the dust of sneezing and choking to the Homunculus Servant, it flies over to the enemies and, positions itself vertically enough that the area is not going to hit any of your allies. It throws it, and then now it's in the area of effect, but it's a construct, so it's immune, and all the enemies now have to make this save. And it's DC 15, which is a decently high save, even for Constitution save. So that's pretty good. And I don't mean it's really high, like it's not going to get everybody all the time, but that's high enough that this is going to have value, right? So it's a great way to just crowd control all of the enemies or a whole group of enemies, okay? And it's not like it's a cloud effect, right? It doesn't create a cloud that if you walk into later, it's going to happen. It just happens right that moment. Boom, everybody in the area has to make the save, and then it's gone, right? At least the effect of this thing is gone from the area, okay? The creatures that fail their save or keep, suffering the effects of it until they succeed at their save. But other than that, anybody who walks into the area where this happened is completely unaffected. So your Homunculus Servant can run out there at the start of combat, boom, hit it, drop it on all of the enemies, and then now your allies are taking their turns running right into the space where that happened, and they're unaffected, and they're just attacking enemies. Also note that this, a really important point here, is that the incapacitated condition is not affected by you or your allies hitting them. Usually for things that cause the incapacitated condition, like almost every spell that causes incapacitated, it is either immediately ended by any damage, like the sleep spell, or they get a resave with advantage, like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, okay? The one that I think doesn't allow it, right, is the Otto's Irresistible Dance, level 6 spell. Okay, but this is an uncommon magic item. So at level, at a far lower level, you could be creating this, give it to your Homunculus Servant, and it's just like dropping it on enemies. Now you can only do it once per day if you're using your replicated magic item to create the dust of sneezing and choking, or you could craft more doses of this using your actual downtime. It's like 10 days to craft an uncommon magic item. Half of that if it's consumable, which, check with your DM. This doesn't have the consumable tag on it, but it is limited doses. So I don't know, check with your DM to see if he or she rules it as a consumable item. That would cut the crafting time in half. And yes, don't forget that at level 11, you now have spell storing item, which is probably, I don't even know if probably, it's definitely the best feature the whole Artificer gets, which is both great that it got an upgrade and a bummer that it's kind of a design fail, that it's this great feature that you just don't get until very, very late, right? And a lot of campaigns are ending around level 11 and 13. So you might not get this at the very near the end of your career as an Artificer, which is unfortunate, right? They should have given it to you at level 5 and had it scale. Just scale up on the level of spell you can put in it. Anyway, so last time I'm going to say that. Probably. But yes, I've said it, and everybody else has probably said it too. This is a great thing to give to your Homunculus, right? So put an awesome 3rd level spell in there if you can. If you can't, get an awesome 2nd level spell, put it in there, give it to the Homunculus, and let the Homunculus fire this off every round of combat, whether it's a heal spell or an attack spell or something, right? A command spell. Even a command spell might not be too bad. You're trading the Homunculus's action for the monster's whole turn, and the Homunculus's action isn't very good, unless you've got something, a better spell that you're putting in the spell storing item. So that's actually probably a pretty good trade-off for the Homunculus to just be casting command, or even like blindness deafness if you can get it on a single creature. The trick is getting those onto your Artificer spell list so that it counts as an Artificer spell that you can put into the spell storing item. Magic Item Tinker at level 6. Okay, this one replaced the Tool Expertise, which was cool and flavorful, but this is so much better. And this is actually quite good. All right, I think a lot of people kind of just blow past this one and focus on like spell storing item and Flash of Genius. This is so good, okay? First up, charge magic item. You can do this unlimited number of times per day as long as you have spell slots left, okay? And every spell slot you expend, you give a charged magic item that many charges back, okay? So a 1st level spell gives gives 1 charge back to the item. A 2nd level spell slot gives 2 charges back to the item, and so on, right? All right, but you can get pretty efficient with different kinds of magic items. Now, the winged boots is one of the examples they use in the Artificer preview. It has 4 charges, and if you run out of charges, you can expend a first level spell slot, give it 1 charge back. It lasts for 1 hour, and that gives you another fly speed of 30 feet for 1 hour with 1 first level spell slot that you expended to recharge it. Yeah, to their point, they're like, that's like the a concentration free fly spell that you've given yourself, and you can do this at level 6, right? Because the winged boots you get at level 6. So you can give it a charge back. Now, I don't know if you're going to be using all 4 charges commonly in a day. That's a lot of charges to consume when it lasts an hour each. But if you do, that's like another fly spell for a first level spell slot that you're giving, right? And yes, this can be your allies too, not just you, right? It takes a bonus action, and you are giving anybody within 5 feet of yourself who has a magic item a charge back. This gains a lot of economy of scale with those magic items that have very few charges, because when it has very few charges, it usually is more powerful, right? Like a wand of magic missiles is maybe not a great thing to spend this on because you're only going to give it 1 charge for one first level spell slot, and that's the same thing as a magic missile. A magic missile is a first level spell, but using it on like a wand of fireballs or a necklace of fireballs, pretty good. You can't actually create a wand of fireballs as an artificer with replicate magic item, but you can create a necklace of fireballs. Now those, I don't think you can actually recharge a necklace of fireballs. Check with your DM because that actually is described as not having charges, but in fact having beads, and the beads get consumed. So just make sure you're checking all the items and make sure that these things are going to work with your DM. But here's another example of something that might work, right? It only has 1 charge. It recovers up to a 3rd level spell slot, and it's used once per day and doesn't gain and can't be reused until the next dawn. It isn't described as having charges, so it may not qualify depending on how your DM interprets it, but functionally, it functions as if it has just 1 charge per day. And using a first level spell slot to refuel your spell refueling item that gives a 3rd level spell slot is a pretty good trade-off. And if you're like a sorcerer, somebody pointed out on my Discord, you could be using this to like recover almost infinite spell slots. So yes, definitely check with your DM before you just decide to do this, because that could be shenanigans. But Pearl of Power basically works the same way too. And there are a lot of items that have like functionally 1 charge like this. All of those like spellcaster spell focus items, magic items from like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, like the Monk's Dragonhide Belt, all of those have like a once per day use thing that is, a lot of them can, not all of them have a once per day use, but most of them have a once per day use that's quite valuable, right? Like the Cleric and Paladin one gives them a Channel Divinity back. The Monk gives them key points back. The Sorcerer one gives them spell, like 5 sorcery points back, I think, something crazy like that. So it's pretty, if your DM is going to allow those to be treated like they have charges so you can recharge them, which DM, I would encourage you to allow it, because that makes the Artificer so much more valuable. And the Artificer's frankly struggling at levels 1 to 10, right? It's not until they get their spell storing item at level 11 that the Artificer really takes off. So let them be cooler if the party's like, yes, we have a level 6 Artificer in the party and they're recharging all of our magic items, making us all more awesome, right? Let the Artificer be awesome. But also, right, they can be recharging all of those items. So if and even at higher levels, if your DM allows this to work, even at higher levels, they might have a better version of that item, and that item that they're using is no longer like their primary item. So what you can do now, going back over here, is let them use the lesser item, right? The +1 version of the item. They've got a +2 and +3 version of the item. So they still attune to the +1 version of the item. Then they use its once per day feature. They swap out that attunement, and you either drain that item to gain a spell slot back, or you transmute it into something else that's more useful for you, right? So they consume the once per day use, and then you make it something better. So that kind of dovetails into our next thing I want to talk about, which is making good use of your transmute magic item feature and your drain magic item feature. You only get to do each of those once per long rest, but this is where, yes, you can be draining magic items to get spell slots back, and you would want to target items that are run out of charges, right? If you don't want to spend another spell slot to recharge that thing for whatever reason, then yes, drain it, get a spell slot back. Great. I would try to target, make sure it's an uncommon item at least, so you get a 2nd level spell slot back. I do not know why they did not allow a 3rd level spell, a rare item to give you a 3rd level spell slot. It would have worked just fine. I think maybe they were thinking like, oh no, that would give you a 3rd level spell slot at level 6. No, because you cannot create rare items at level 6. You can only create uncommon items at level 6. You can't create rare items at the level of 10, and you got third level spell slots at level 9. It would have worked just fine, guys. And oh no, let's not have the Artificer have another third level spell slot. The Artificer is still one of the weakest classes in the game overall before level 11. All right, at level 11 they catch way up. Transmute magic item is a great one because it's not entirely spelled out, but a couple of things here. One, I would use the rules for when you transmute a magic item. I would use the rules for creating a magic item and call it the same thing, okay, or treat it the same way using these rules, right? That's how I would treat it. Just because this just answers a lot of questions about, you know, preventing like player shenanigans that shouldn't work. Like now you have two of the same item because you created one and then transmuted another. All right, it kind of shuts down a bunch of shenanigans that shouldn't work, but also just gives you explanations of how the thing works, how the thing is going to function correctly, right? Including you auto attune to it, so you can transmute it and auto attune to it, which is just would be just a nice little additional perk to this thing that you're going to transmute. And if you want to transmute it to something that requires attunement, you're automatically already attuned to it. It would also mean that the item that you just transmuted starts off with all of its charges. So if it's a charged item like a wand of web and it's all out of charges, you can now transmute it and create a new item that has its own set of charges, like now a necklace of fireballs, and be throwing that. I mean, that is not charges, but it's got new uses of things that it's going to be valuable for you. There's another circumstantial situation I want to talk about, or two circumstantial situations I want to talk about, right? The ability to see invisible things and the ability to deal with water, right? Those two situations are rather circumstantial. They're just not everyday kind of things that are going to come up every adventuring day in D&D. And so it's kind of hard to justify preparing see invisibility. It's going to sit there on your spell list, and you probably won't use it, very many times. It might come up half a dozen times in your campaign, right? And frankly, maybe as we as DMs should try harder to use more invisible creatures and visible spells as well if we see that a player has prepared that, right? That's definitely a good point. And same thing with water, right? So and all the same comments for water, right? DMs, we should try harder to use water more often, especially if we see that a player has prepared something on their character sheet to deal with water. But for the rest of the time, right, this is what you can do as a player. This is a great use for your transmute magic item. Make sure you have a plan, like a bit of advice, right? You don't have to do this, but you could make one of those plans that you don't create every day, right? The two extra ones you have, you get two extras, right? So make one of those plans something to deal with invisibility, and make the other plan something to deal with water. And then they just are there on your list of plans, but you never make them until that situation comes up, and then bam, magic item. As a magic action, you transmute one of your magic items you probably don't care about, bag of holding or goggles of night or something like that, turn it into a magic item that's going to let you see invisibility, or a magic item that's going to let you deal with water, and now you're the hero saving the day, right? Just another moment for the Artificer to be like, yes, my ability to be flexible and versatile paid off. And that's another reason why I wish they had not reduced your number of plans known, because that would have made this even better, right? Even better. And not like it's powerful. It's just not at all OP, but just the Artificer's ability to be like, okay, I have a magic item to deal with invisibility, a magic item to deal with like fog clouds, a magic item to deal with like water, or making like water go away, like the dust of dryness, or dealing with water breathing, water walking, having a climbing speed, having a swimming speed, right? If they just had all these extra plans and could be popping those things out as needed, that is like versatility is like one of the core themes of the Artificer. And by reducing the number of plans known, they took away the versatility, or reduced the versatility you could have, which is a bummer. So, DMs, go ahead, and I encourage you to homebrew, increase that limit of number of plans known, or maybe create like a homebrew feat. That's probably what I'm going to do. Create a feat that gives you additional plans known that Artificers can take. So, all right, this level 6 magic item Tinker is really good. Don't sleep on it. I want to talk about Flash of Genius. All right, Flash of Genius is, probably the other premier feature of the Artificer. This is your like really big support feature. It's not as good as a Paladin's Aura of Protection, but it's like runner up, right? There's not many features are as good as this across any other class either, right? This is a really big, good feature, and stacks with the Paladin's Aura of Protection, which kind of makes it broken when you stack these things. But it is what it is. This is what we got. They made it better so that it only triggers the reaction when they fail, which is better in most ways. It's slightly worse because you can't use it on initiative checks anymore. You used to be able to use it on initiative checks, I don't think I ever saw anybody do that. Maybe once. But I think that's a great trade-off, right? The fact that you're no longer wasting flashes of genius because you're not triggering it when you didn't need it. You're only using it when they fail. Okay. All right, but it's still a pretty limited resource. At level 7, you probably only have 4 uses of it. Maybe at level 8, you get 5 uses of it. Somewhere between levels 8 and 12, right? You're going to get 5 uses of it. It's a very potent feature, and you want to save most of those uses of it for when somebody fails a saving throw, because failing a saving throw is almost always a much bigger deal than somebody failing an ability check. Okay, now if there is like a really, I don't know, the rogue's investigation check to investigate a trap, and they roll so low that they set off the trap, okay, maybe use this to buff that up, buff up their check so that they don't fail that and accidentally set off the trap, or when they're trying to disarm it, right? Same thing, they might set it off. But I would probably, those would be those kind of scenarios where it's definitely going to cause damage if they don't succeed at this check, is when I would use Flash of Genius, and probably only when I have most of my uses. Once I start getting low, I want to save those for combat, to make sure that my character and my allies are succeeding on their saving throws. But when you reach level 14, you gain 1 Flash of Genius back when you take a short rest. So now you can be a little bit more loose with it and using it on a few more ability checks. And at level 20, you get all uses back on every short rest, which means you're going to have 5 every single short rest. That's just a ton of Flashes of Genius. Now just use it on every ability check, like all the time, right? Just use it like it's going out of style, right? Because you're going to get it back on a short rest. You're probably going to have plenty of it for the next combat. Now, depending on how often your DM is calling for ability checks, and I call for a lot, like 5 to 10 per hour of gameplay, right? I call for a lot of ability checks. You still don't want to just be burning those if you're down. You want to keep a couple for combat. So if you're down to 1 or 2, you might want to save it unless you're pretty sure you're going to have a short rest before combat. All right, moving on to level 11, and we're back to the spell storing item, okay? But I was talking about it before because it was with your homunculus. Now let's just talk about spell storing item itself, all right? So yes, the alchemist and the cartographer do not get a good level 3 spell on their spell list that they can put into the spell storing item. And without that, probably the best level 3 item to put in a spell storing item is like haste, except that you don't need to cast it like 8 to 10 times per day. You need to cast it maybe 3 or 4 times per day. It's like once per combat, right? Maybe twice in a combat if it loses concentration, right? But if you're going to put haste on, if you're going to have a homunculus put haste on somebody, I would have it cast haste and then run away and get as far away from combat as it can, just to ensure that your ally is not going to get like lose a turn because they've got the haste lethargy going on. All right, but here's some ideas for what to put into your spell storing item, if you're an alchemist or cartographer, right? So you can put in aid, right? A bunch of castings of aid is still pretty good. That's 3 targets regaining 5 hit points. And even though they already have aid and it doesn't increase their maximum hit points again, they can still be gaining the current hit point healing, right? That it gives. It's essentially a heal spell that gives 5 hit points. And that's to 3 targets. So just have it spam that, even though people are, mostly high on hit points. Why not, right? Even if they're full and they don't have an 8 on them, go ahead and hit them again, right? or hit a new target, right? The first time they do it, they give it to half the party. The second time they do it, they give it to the other half of the party. And by then, it's now round 3 and people are taking damage. So go ahead and just keep using it on people again to just heal damage, right? Probably a better use of the homunculus's turn. Vortex warp. Okay, again, if you're going to put vortex warp in it, I would probably give it to homunculus, and that could be warping your allies around the battlefield, getting them into position better, or warping enemies to get them out of position. Okay, so pretty good. Web. Now you can then, this is a way to give your homunculus web, because wand of web doesn't work, but giving your homunculus web, yeah, do you need 10 castings of web? Maybe, because a lot of times creatures will get out of your web, unless you have like a lot of push and pull effects to put them back in, then you can just have your homunculus serve it, again, using web to just cast web again. Even though it's already concentrating on web, just end it and drop a new web at the new location, webbing the enemies again. So you might get a lot of benefit out of casting it a lot more than 3 or 4 times per day. You might get all 8 uses out of it. Just recast, webbing enemies constantly as they move out of the web. Just recast to their new location. All right, Flame Arrows is a 3rd level spell. You could put that in it, and you could have it buff any ranged attacker archer that you have in the party, right? It works on their quiver. It gives them 12 pieces of ammunition. I think it has to be arrows, unfortunately. Hopefully they'll update that, and then it's just any ammunition. And each one does an extra 1d6 damage, okay? that's not like a good use of your action economy or concentration as the artificer, but that's a great use of your homunculus's action economy. Just have it throwing down flame arrows on your archer, and if you got more than one archer, even better, right? Use it on both of them as much as you can, so that they're just firing off lots of arrows. Because an extra 1d6 on a class that can make, you know, 2 or 4 attacks with an arrow, that's a decent amount of damage. That's 46 per round. All right. And then, yes, this has come up a number of times, but it's too important to not call out again here, which is use dragon marks, right? These dragon mark feats to add third level spells to your spell list that are good for your spell storing item, okay? So clairvoyance and non-detection, not great. And these do work because it says right here, these spells are added to your spell list. And if a spell is added to your spell list as an artificer, then that means it is now an artificer spell and you can put it in the spell storing item, right? That's how spell storing, that's not it. That's how spell storing item works. It has to be an artificer spell. Okay. So add these spells to your spell list. They now count as artificer spells. So Beacon of Hope, Conjure Animals, those are great options. Okay. I mean, Beacon of Hope, if you're trying to be the healer, that's pretty good because then it maximizes your healing instead of rolling dice. So you could be an alchemist and basically get the feature that life clerics get at much higher levels, and you're doing that with Beacon of Hope. Okay, yes, it's going to take your concentration, but once again, put that on your homunculus servant. Now it's concentrating on Beacon of Hope. You're concentrating on something else, and yes, you're throwing out maximized healing spells. Awesome. Or Conjure Animals was just an awesome blast spell. So don't sleep on that one. Aura Vitality, great for healing, right? And you might want to get this one anyway as a artificer if you're trying to be the healer, or you can turn any any of the artificer subclasses into a good healer by just taking this. Right? It gives you healing word, which you desperately needed, prayer of healing, which you really need, aura vitality, which you absolutely need. Now the battlesmith already has aura vitality, so battlesmith is already a decent healer without this, but they still benefit from getting healing word, mass healing word. Greater restoration, that's already on the, if I recall correctly, already on. No, it's not on the artificer spell list, right? So, and that's a very much needed spell that a healer should have, right? If you're the healer, you really need access to that spell at level 9, right? And what's a great way to give that get access to that when you are level 9 and the party's level 9 instead of when the artificer turns level 17? Yes, the potent Dragon Mark once again, right? That gives you that spell slot. So when you are level 9, you can cast Greater Restoration when the party is expecting it and needing it if you're trying to be the healer for the party, right? And Potent Dragon Mark comes back on a short rest. So you're going to be a decent healer for the party, even though you're an artificer and a half caster. All right. And of course, here's the one that's one of the most popular ones. Not the greater mark of making, the lesser mark of making, all right? Because this puts Conjure Barrage on your spell list, and now you can put Conjure Barrage into your spell storing item, and now your homunculus is a top tier blaster, just firing Conjure Barrage every round, and your damage is through the roof. Doesn't matter which subclass you are. You could be the cartographer, and your damage is going to be amazing at level 11. All right, I want to talk about some replicate magic item plan tactics that are a little bit more advanced than what I covered yesterday in my replicate magic item video. And yes, I know this comes out on a level 2, so it's a little bit out of order, but most of the stuff I want to talk about actually is plans available later, like at level 6. So that's what I'm going to talk about them here. So first up, alchemy jug. So I did mention this one yesterday, and I do want to make a correction here. I just off the top of my head was thinking that it took 8 ounces to create a single dose of these, but Ultimate Mustache X pointed out positively for me, thank you, that a vial is actually only 4 ounces. Okay, so that means with your alchemy jug, yes, 1 day of pouring 4 ounces of your basic poison gives you 1 dose of poison. So you get 1 dose of poison per day, and that gives you 2 doses of acid per day. And a cool thing to combo with a flask of acid is the catapult spell, which artificers have. It's a level 1 spell. It basically takes an object and flings it, and it does like 3d8 damage, but the object takes 3d8 damage too. So if you have a vial of acid and it takes 3d8 damage, that's going to break the glass vial and cover them in acid too, right? Then they can, at the very least, need to make a dex save against that acid, and they might take more damage, which is a good way to make the catapult spell a lot better for you. Now, a vial costs 1 gold piece, as you can see here. But 1 gold piece to make your catapult spell do a lot more damage is probably worth it. And if you have the glass blowing tool proficiency, you can make these yourself for half the cost, saving yourself a little bit more money. Just, yes, finally, there is a use for the glass blower proficiency. All right, let's move down here to, I think it's our level 10 plans now because we're going to leverage the uncommon wondrous items, okay? So a uncommon wondrous item is the arcane battery. This is an item you make that can recharge other items, right? Which you might be saying, well, I can just do that myself, right? I can use my charge item to give it, expend a spell slot and give that item charges back. Except that your charge item is actually pretty expensive compared to this, right? You would need this one cause it to regain 2 to 5 charges. You would need to spend a second to fifth level spell slot to give that many charges back to an item, and you don't have. I mean, you don't even have fifth level spell slots until you're level 17. So you do not want to be like spending a bunch of spell slots to give that many charges back to an item. So this becomes more valuable. So you can make one of these, especially when you get to the point where you have so many plans you can be making per day, and most of them you're not using, right? Because you're pretty much going to reach a point pretty soon after level 10, I think, where you're going to be finding better magic items than your replicate magic item feature can create, and then that's what you and the party are attuning to. So you're going to have a lot of these replicate magic item plans, magic items you can create left over that you're not really using for much. Well, this is a great option now because you just create an arcane battery and it recharges 1d4 plus 1 expended charges to another item that really is powerful, like your staff of power that somebody has now, right? Giving 1d4 plus 1 charges back to your staff of power is a very good use of your replicate magic item feature. Now, unfortunately, it says the battery loses its magic after it's used, which means you can't drain it or transmute it anymore because it no longer qualifies because it's no longer a magic item. All right, Dust of Disappearance. This is not a one that you can get at level 10 as well. And it gives you multiple use. Oh, no, it gives you one use, but as a utilize action, it can turn the whole party invisible for 2d4 minutes. That's pretty useful, right? And the whole party becoming invisible is worthwhile. It's a single use of a replicate magic item. So that's a pretty good use of it, especially when, like I said, you reach that point where you're no longer like it's no longer your core items anymore, right? This is still a great use for it. So I'd keep that around. Ever smoking bottle. This is one you might want to create and keep even before you reach the point where you're no longer just using replicate magic items for your leftovers. Because this one, if you know how to use smoke, is quite powerful, right? You don't want to just be throwing this down all the time because what it does is it prevents people, you and the enemies, from having advantage and disadvantage. Okay, because the way heavy obscurement works or heavily obscured works is it basically causes the blinded condition for both creatures. And this is a cloud, so even if you have like devil sight or dark vision, you can't see through the cloud. Okay, you would need blind sight. Only blind sight sees through this. Okay, so if you're facing monsters that have devil sight and they're creating darkness and you don't have devil sight or blind sight to see through the darkness, and they have advantage against you and you have disadvantage against them, use this and it cancels their advantage and cancels your disadvantage. Okay, which is strange, but because they can't see you when you attack them, you have advantage to attack them. But because you can't see them when you attack them, you also have disadvantage when you attack them, which means you have advantage and disadvantage on every attack, and therefore it cancels out. And every creature is treated the same way, right? They all have advantage and disadvantage, which means everything cancels out. So it's a great way to level the playing field if you need to, but do not use this if your party has like Vex weapons and there's no like reason to, like, you're not in that darkness where they have advantage against you and you don't have advantage against them, right? Do not use this because you're going to be canceling out your party's advantage that they get from a bunch of different sources, like Fairy Fire, Vex, the fighters. What's it called? Studied attacks or studied. I can't remember their 10th level ability that means whenever they miss, they automatically have advantage on their next attack, right? Barbarian's reckless attack. You would be canceling out the barbarian's reckless attack, and no instances like the instances of advantage and disadvantage don't count, right? One instance of advantage cancels out a million infinite instances of disadvantage, and one instance of disadvantage cancels out a million infinite instances of advantage. So it's not like, well, I have 3 sources of advantage and 2 sources of disadvantage, therefore we have advantage. No, they're canceled out. As long as you have one on either side, they're all canceled out. And the last item I want to talk about as a kind of a more advanced use for artificers is the Thayan spell tattoo. Okay, so the artificers have so many great things about them. One of their biggest weak points is their spell list, though. They have a pretty bad spell list. It's one of the worst spell lists in the game. I don't know if it's worse than Warlock. It might be. Like, it might be the worst spell list in the game. So this is a way to compensate for that. All right. These, and I mentioned them yesterday in the replicate magic item video, but it bears covering again today because this is so important for the artificer. All right. So the upside of this is that, and it's different than the spell rot tattoo that we got from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. one of the differences is this can only be used to put spells in it that are levels 1 to 3. Okay, you cannot put anything higher than a third level spell. But third level is when the Artificer spell list really starts dropping off. Like they've got a decent list of first and second level spells. There's third level spell list, and fourth and fifth really drop off, and there's just very few good spells there. Okay, so you can give yourself a third level spell because not only for a free use of it, but as long as you have that tattoo and you haven't expended the free use, you have that spell prepared, which means you can now cast that spell with your spell slots. So you can give yourself literally anything in the game, any third level spell in the whole game. You can give yourself Conjure Barrage. Now, this I don't think it adds this spell to your spell list. I don't think it counts for that. So you wouldn't be able to put this, give yourself this tattoo and then use that to put the spell in your spell storing item. I don't think it works that way. Maybe talk with your DM, see how they rule it, but I don't think this does that. But at least it gives you a really good third level spell that you could be using, right? So you can give yourself Hypnotic Pattern, you can give yourself the Fear spell, or a Vitality if you're trying to be the healer, Fireball, Lightning Bolt, right? All of these things, like I already said, Conjure Barrage. You can give yourself Sleet Storm, Major Image, Conjure Animals, right? Just literally any spell in the game, any third level spell in the game that's awesome, you got it. Now the downside is, and this is where it's different from the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything spell rot tattoos did not take attunement or require attunement. This one does. So that's the big downside, which is why I don't know how many classes would use this, especially if you're talking about third level spells, right? But you know who has more attunement slots than anyone else? The Artificer. So starting at level 10, you start having more attunement slots than anyone else. You get 4 at level 10. What is it? 5 at level 14 and 6 at level 18. So if you're one of the subclasses, okay, aka the Alchemist and the Cartographer, who don't have good third level spells that are added to their spell list, like Alchemist gets Gaseous Form, which is very thematic and cool, but not a great spell. Like it's a pretty circumstantial spell. And they get Mass Healing Word, which is okay. And for them, pretty good, actually, because they've got a level 5 buff to it. But you can't put that in your spell storing item, and you don't want to be, you don't need to use Mass Healing Word all the time, every round. So give yourself or Vitality through a Thayan spell tattoo, or give yourself Fireball, or give yourself Conjure Barrage. And now you've got a really great use for your third level spell slots that you didn't have before, right? And same thing for the Cartographer. They do not have great things to be using with their third level spell slots, but give yourself something that has that makes an attack roll, and now it synergizes. You get that bonus damage from Guided Strikes, or whatever that thing is called, their 5th level ability, because you put Fairy Fire on them, and then you use a attack roll spell. I can't think of a good attack roll spell that's 3rd level off the top of my head. Melf's Acid Arrow, Scorching Ray, those are 2nd level. Melf's Acid Arrow is not a great one. But it would benefit from the bonus damage from Guided Strikes if you hit somebody that's got your Fairy Fire on them. Okay? Yes, give yourself any third level spell in the game that would benefit you. Probably worth at least 1 attunement slot to do that. Maybe 2. Give yourself a couple of these spells, right? Let's wrap up with some subclass specific tactics, okay? So first up, Alchemist. All right. Okay, so according to the player's handbook, if you're proficient with the herbalism kit, you can craft the common level of potions of healing faster than others can, okay? You can craft it in 1 day instead of 2.5 days, right? And it does list that 1 day of downtime equals 8 hours of work, okay? And then you have this that cuts the time for crafting potions in half, which means in 4 hours of work, you could craft a common level potion of healing, right? Stick with me here. If you're an elf, you finish a long rest in 4 hours, the rest of your party needs 8 hours, right? So what are you doing with that time? You can make a common level potion of healing every single day while you're just waiting around for your allies to finish sleeping, all right? Yes, it takes 25 gold pieces to craft it every day, and check with your DM if they're going to use downtime, but you know what? I have been looking for ways to leverage those abilities that certain species have where they can complete a long rest in less time. Like a Warforged can complete a long rest in 6 hours, right? And according to the Dungeon Master's Guide and Player's Handbook, the time you spend on crafting an item does not have to be contiguous. So a Warforged can complete a common level potion of healing. Alchemist, Warforged, can complete a common level potion of healing every 2 days while they're just waiting for their allies to finish sleeping, laying around, and eating, stuffing their faces with other organic materials when the Warforged doesn't need to do that, right? Okay. And you might think that with the experimental elixirs, that these features are so valuable that maybe you should just, at the beginning of the day, dump all your first level spell slots and create specific elixirs that you want to use. And at levels 3 and 4, yeah, you might want to do that. You lose some flexibility in that you've pre-chosen, I don't know, a bunch of healing elixirs, and now you don't have the flexibility to, say, cast other spells that you need with your first level spell slots that would have been better in the moment. So, be careful with that. But when you hit level 5, you probably don't want to be doing that, because you get an additional bonus of your intelligence modifier to any spell that you cast that restores hit points or deals fire, acid, or poison. Okay, and it has to be a roll. So this feature won't boost the aid spell, because aid spell doesn't roll. Okay, but it will boost healing word and cure wounds. Right now, the hit point restoration that cure wounds restores is 2d8 plus your spellcasting modifier. So it'd be 2d8 plus your intelligence, right? Which is the same as this calculation. But this adds your intelligence again. So now cure wounds becomes 2d8 plus 8 when your intelligence modifier is plus 4, and it'd be plus 10 when you have a 20 intelligence score. So now your cure wounds, whatever your intelligence modifier is now healing more than your elixir. Now, when it gets to a 3d8 or a 4d8, now you might want to consider, spending more of your first level spell slots to pre-create a bunch of healing elixirs. Maybe, right? Because the flexibility of having a spell slot can just be better, right? But on the other hand, the party members, you pre-creating it and just handing it out to the party members so they already have those available, so that you don't have to do it and spend action economy to do it in the middle of combat, has its own benefit. So find a balance somewhere in the middle. All right, let's move on to the Armorer. Okay. So one of the biggest problems with the Armorer is that its damage just isn't very good. Now, some people say, and this is absolutely true, the Armorer, you are a tank or a scout, right? Or kind of a martial battlefield controller with the Dreadnought, which is true. You are those things. And those things add value. But tanking is not always needed. Scouting is not always needed. And battlefield control is not always needed, especially if you have other marshals in the party with a bunch of their own weapon masteries, right? Then your Dreadnought push and pull effect loses some value. It just isn't as valuable because other people are also doing that thing, right? And the number one fallback to doing something valuable when the main thing you're doing isn't valuable is damage, right? I'm not a big fan of like focus damage, and damage should be the number one focus of your build. I am not a fan of that at all, unless you are the skirmisher or the ranged attacker, right? Like that is part of your job, is to deal damage, okay? But most of the time, I don't think damage should be your number one focus. But it should probably be your second or third, right? It should be somewhere on your list of things that you do that can contribute in combat. And the Armorer's damage is just really, really low. And they just gave it a very minimal buff here. Very minimal. And it comes on way late. So a great way to buff your damage is to take Fey Touched to get Hunter's Mark or Hex, right? Because now they do have extra attack. And that's an extra 1d6 on every attack you hit with, right? And for like the Infiltrator armor, your damage is 1d6. You get an extra 1d6 once per turn. But adding a d6 to every single attack is like doubling your damage before level 15 when it goes to a 2d6, but it's still a 30% damage increase for you. So it is a decent damage increase for you to be using Hunter's Mark or Hex. Pick your favorite on which one is more valuable. I like both of them, but you don't need both of them. Just get one, right? And you can only get one through Fey Touched. And another option is Shadow Touched, right? Because they changed Wrathful Smite to be a necromancy spell, which means now you can get it with Shadow Touched. And that is a great way to weaponize your spell slots. So when you hit somebody, you can smite them with Wrathful Smite. It's not a ton of damage, but it is damage, and that is going to help you deal damage. You might want to, like, if damage is the only thing you're looking for, you might want to wait to use Wrathful Smite until you crit, because then it just doubles the amount of damage that Wrathful Smite's adding. But it has a good control effect, causes the Frightened condition for a minute without concentration. So you can concentrate on your Hunter's Mark or Hex and be throwing down Wrathful Smites if you get both of those features, or both of those feats. And by the way, they both allow you to increase your intelligence, which is something you want to do as an Artificer, is bump up your intelligence, right? And one of the problems with Artificers and being like one of the armor or a battlesmith is that, yes, you're kind of a half martial, but unfortunately, all of the martial feats bump your strength and dexterity, which isn't the main thing you want. The first thing you want is intelligence. So these are great ways to bump your intelligence and still improve your damage or other martial capabilities. Moving on down to the artillerist. So they get proficiency with all martial ranged weapons, which is firearms. So that's great, but also heavy crossbows, longbows, everything like that, right? And you might be thinking, like, what's the point of that? Well, I did mess this up on the when I talked about the Alchemist build video I did, which is because of the special requirements that artificers have, that they must always be holding either a wand or weapon that was created through the replicate magic item, or they must be holding one of their artisan tools in order to cast a spell. That means that a artificer cannot have a shield and be holding a weapon and cast True Strike, because you need a hand free unless that weapon you're holding is created by your replicate magic item, right? And on the Alchemist build that I did, Vishara, she was not using, she did not use one of her replicate magic items for that weapon. So that actually doesn't work at levels 3 and 4, right? But at level 5, the Artillerist has this feature which says you can turn any wand, rod staff, or martial ranged weapon into an arcane firearm. You carve these symbols into it, and now you can use this item as a spellcasting focus. Okay? Yep, right there, as a spellcasting focus, which means now the hand crossbow, you got a shield in one hand and a repeating, well, the repeating one would work anyway, but some sort of like vicious hand crossbow, right? So you can't create a vicious hand crossbow with your replicate magic item. Your shield is, who knows, whatever that is, your hands are full, right? But you put your arcane firearm on your hand crossbow, and now you've got a shield, hand crossbow, and you are able to cast spells and use True Strike with your hand crossbow, right? So this fixes that for you, and now you've got a great combo, right? And True Strike plus one with one attack per round is actually a decent amount of damage. And so this is a great way to have a resource-free ranged attacker build, because you're using your action to cast True Strike. You're still well armored, right? You've got medium armor, you got a shield, and your Eldritch Cannons are firing off as a bonus action, right? Either doing Protector or the Flamethrower or the Eldritch Cannon, for single target range damage. So you're going to be able to deal out a decent amount of damage without using any resources, right? You're just your Eldritch Cannon and your cantrip. Very nice. All right, let's move on to the Battlesmith. And I don't have anything for the Cartographer yet. So if you have ideas for the Cartographer, let me know. But the Battlesmith, all right, first up, Steel Defender. Now, talk with your DM about this, because the Steel Defender, you choose what it looks like, right? You can decide if it has 2 or 4 legs. You choose its appearance. I would say if you gave it 4 legs, it can't also have arms, right? I'm not going to let you give it like 8 arms and now it's got like, can hold 8 weapons and 8 wands and things like that, right? So the way I would handle that is, if you choose 2 legs, then it can have 2 arms, right? And it can hold things with those arms. If you choose 4 legs, then it has no arms. But if it has 4 legs, then it can wear barding. Now, barding doesn't specifically say that the thing has 4 legs, but it does talk about appropriate anatomy, and barding goes on like mounts and things like that. And I think one of the reasons you can put barding on a creature that doesn't have armor training is that the nature of barding, kind of going to the real world physics intuition here, is that it just rests on the animal, and the animal is right. The animal doesn't need to be trained to use it. The animal just needs to be trained to be used to the weight. So it doesn't need specific training. Therefore, you can put it on anything that doesn't have training. But I would say it probably has to have 4 legs or some sort of anatomy that allows the weight of that barding to be distributed and essentially still cover their body, right? If you're standing upright, the barding just kind of hangs on you. Okay, and if you're standing upright, that means it only hangs in covering a certain area, or if it hangs too far, then it just gets in the way of your hands and legs, right? And that would be the trade-off in my mind, right? If it's got 4 legs, I'll let it wear barding, and if it's got 2 legs, I'll let it hold items. But talk to your DM, because it doesn't give any specifics on how that's handled. But I do think it's too much to just say, well, it can have any number of hands that you want and any number of legs. Okay, I think that's too much. All right, but if it's got 4 legs, you put barding on it to raise its AC, because its AC is not very good. And yes, you can put magic armor on it, okay? Now, you could give it weapons, but like I mentioned, it has no proficiency. It has no weapon proficiencies, and it's not trained in any armor or shield. So even though you could give it a shield, it's not going to benefit from a shield because it doesn't have training with a shield. But give it barding, and it can have any number of magic items. So everything I said that applies to a homunculus can also apply to the steel defender, right? So you can give it magic items. It can attune to magic items. It doesn't count as a spellcaster, so it can't use a wand of web, but it can use everything else, and it can hold anything else. So you can have it hold a weapon of warning. It won't be effective attacking with it, but it can hold it, attune to it, and give the whole party the benefit of it without using one of your attunement slots, right? If you don't have a homunculus, but you should definitely have a homunculus. And everything I talked about with those feats for the armor apply even more so to the battlesmith, right? You can use Fey Touch to get Hunter's Mark or Hex to increase your damage. You can use Shadow Touch to get Wrathful Smite as a level 1 smite. Now, you might say, well, I already have a smite spell. Yes, you got Shining Smite, which does the same amount of damage per spell slot that Wrathful Smite does. The reason you might still want Wrathful Smite is because Shining Smite is a second level smite, right? So you can't weaponize any of your first level spell slots. But Wrathful Smite will let you weaponize your first level spell slots. And if you really, really want to like boost up your damage, it's a good way to do it. And it gives you the intelligence boost, which you want as a battlesmith, right? All right, and back to the Steel Defender. If you haven't heard of this tactic, it is very, very common and worth considering. If you are a small-sized species for your player character, then your player character can ride the Steel Defender. As a DM, I would say it has to have the 4-leg configuration to ride it, right? Because it does say that a creature has to have appropriate anatomy for you to use it as a mount, okay? So I would say it has to be the 4-leg version. But if you've got the 4-leg version, you can ride it. And by the way, you can change its configuration every time you create it. So you could have a one day be the 2-armed one, the 2-legged one with 2 arms, and the next day could be the 4-legged one with no arms. All right, so you can ride this thing. Now, and then you get all the benefits of having a mount, right? And you don't have to control it like you do with most mounts, because most mounts are like a regular warhorse. If you're not controlling it, then it doesn't share your initiative. It has its own initiative score and moves on its own turn, right? And it might do its own thing, right? It might decide to just run away from combat. So so if you want it to move during your turn, and that's a problem, right? So if it moves on a separate turn, then you have a whole problem with trying to use your actions to attack. If you're trying to be like a melee attacker, unless you're a ranged attacker, it's okay maybe. But if you're a melee attacker, then you have a problem where on its initiative, it moves up, and now you're in range to make a melee attack, but it's not your turn. So you can't make a melee attack. Well, you could ready an action, but if you ready an attack, you can only make one attack. So even if you have, and as a Battlesmith Artificer at level 5, you get extra attack, but you can't use it if you're attacking with your reaction. So you have to control the mount, right? And then if you control the mount, then it can't attack, but it can use its action to dash, right? Okay, you don't have to worry about that with a Steel Defender because it shares your turn in combat. Not only does it share your initiative score, and it used to share your initiative score and then go after you, but they upgraded it. Now it just acts during your turn, which means you can intertwine its turn with your turn. So you can have it move, then you attack, then it uses this action to either attack as well or disengage and run away or whatever you want. Okay, so that's a very, very common tactic, is to ride this thing. But yes, if you ride this thing, it's going to be, and you're going into melee, it's going to be more exposed to attacks. So get it a Saddle of the Cavalier, which you can make as a replicated magic item at level 10, but it's only an uncommon magic item. So, hopefully your DM allows you to play with downtime, and you can craft it at level 3, 4, or 5, right? The Saddle of the Cavalier means all attacks against it have disadvantage, which its AC is not great, and its hit points are not great. So giving all attacks against it disadvantage is a very nice thing to do. Also, you get the nice little benefit of, it says that you can't be dismounted against your will. It's kind of nebulous what that means. Talk with your DM. Does that mean you can't be knocked off? Who knows? All right, talk with your DM, figure out what that means. And then last but not least, the Battlesmith, you might want to get a Flame Tongue weapon. If you can't get hold of a vicious weapon, right? Maybe the DM, because those are better than Flame Tongue because it's the same damage and a better damage type than the Flame Tongue weapon. The Flame Tongue weapon also requires attunement. But if for some reason the DM's stingy or something like that, and they won't let you craft your own, then use a replicate magic item when you reach level 14 to give yourself a Flame Tongue weapon, because you have more attunement slots than anyone else. So you can fit a Flame Tongue weapon on your build and still attune to as many things. Like you can have all the attunements that anyone else would have. Plus you get 5 at level 14, 5 attunement slots. So you have the Flame Tongue weapon, 3 slots like anyone else have, and still 1 more than anyone else would have. So it's not the attunement slot requirement of Flame Tongue Weapon is not nearly as bad for you as it is for any other class. So you might as well benefit from it. Make sure you get yourself an extra 2d6, which you will need to boost up your damage if you're trying to be a damage dealer, because you don't have a lot of the other features that all the other classes have. All right, that's the last of it. Let me know if you have other ideas, in the comments of tactics that would be good for artificers, ways to make them more effective and more valuable in the party, and to be just as good as anyone else, especially levels 1 to 10, right? That's where the artificer's going to struggle to feel as effective as the rest of the party. And feeling effective is really important to having fun, right? You can have really, really great role play, but if your character just kind of sucks at everything you try to do, or sucks compared to what every other character in the party is doing, it's just hard to have fun. You can be like, yay, I attacked and I did 25% of the damage as the barbarian. Yeah, and the barbarian is tougher and takes more hits. Okay, great. So what am I bringing here? All right, so it's levels 1 to 10. Like, again, the SSI, the spell storing item at level 11, yes, it levels the playing field, and now you're as good as anybody, especially as a battlesmith. You're firing off conjure barrages, or your homunculus is firing off conjure barrages, just wrecking the battlefield, okay? It's levels 1 to 10 that we really need some help there. So if you have ideas, please put it in the comments. Maybe I'll do a Tactics 2.0 video if we get enough of that stuff. And thanks for watching. Remember to be cool when you play D&D. These people are your friends, or they could become your friends, and it's a game. It's for fun, right? It's so be cool, right? Don't wreck any relationships over a game, okay? And thanks for watching. Catch you next time.